ACD committee will now come to order. We do have a quorum. We have Councilmember Herb Weston present, Councilmember Jan Perry present, and myself, the chairman. And we'll begin by taking up the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. Can I have the staff read item number 1?
Item number 1 is a Cardenas Reyes motion requesting that the mayor report relative to the use of the Youth Services Eligibility Tool to screen gang reduction in youth development program participants and related matters.
Okay. Thank you. Members, are there any questions on item number 1? No? No questions? Okay. With that, if there are no objections, we'll move to approve the motion. Could you please read item 2 into the record?
Item 2 is a communication from the mayor in response to questions from the Budget and Finance Committee relative to gang reduction and youth development. This item is also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay. Members, are there any questions on item number 2?
This is a note and file?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no questions or no cards for speaking on item number 2, we'll move the item note and file. Please read item 3 into the record.
Item 3 is a motion by Council Members Rosendahl and Parks relative to authority to negotiate and execute contracts with the advancement project for gang intervention services in the amount of $375,000 for Southwest 2 Grid Zone and $151,875,000 for the Mar Vista Venice community for the period October 1, 2011 to June 30, 2012. This item will be in council on October 14th, and I believe there's a CAO report.
Okay. Is the CAO present?
Good morning. Camilla
Good morning.
Pong, Office of the CAO. I wanted to summarize the recommendations from my report. They include approval of the recommended selection of advancement project to serve as a fiscal sponsor for Helper Foundation / Venice 2000, the intervention services provider for Southwest 2 Grid Zone and Mar Vista Venice community. Also, to authorize the mayor designee to negotiate and execute 2 contracts with Advancement Project, one in the amount of $375,000 to provide fiscal and administrative oversight for Helper in the Southwest 2 Grid Zone, and the second contract to in the amount of $151,875 for the Mar Vista Venice targeted service area, and also to request that Advancement Project subcontract with Helper to provide gang intervention services in both of those targeted areas.
Okay, so in effect, what we're doing here is Advancement Project will be the prime contractor?
Yes.
And who will be the subcontractor on each one of those?
Helper will be the subcontractor on both of those.
Okay. And one of the main reasons for this is to make sure that the work is being done and they have the proper fiscal agent?
Correct.
Okay. That was one of the issues that we brought up, that a lot of community organizations might know how to do things very well on the street, yet they don't have the capacity or the experience of handling the paperwork and the responsibilities of reporting. So this is one way to satisfy that appropriately, correct?
Yes, and Advancement Project is also going to provide like technical assistance to improve their capacity.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're on item number 3, members. We've now been joined by Councilmember Alarcon. Is there any questions on item number 3?
So, I just want to make sure that the CAO is reassured then that there's a proper oversight with a framework built in to be able to support this helper organization, so that even though Advancement is the overall fiduciary, they will be able to provide the technical support so that they can be, self-sustaining?
Yes,
terms of reporting
that's
and
the hope,
compliance?
that eventually they'll be able to take that over.
Had they put a time frame on that?
Well, this contract is for 9 months.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's a short window.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 3, any more questions, members? Okay. Seeing none, we do not have any public comment cards on item number 3. Public comment on item 3 is now closed. So with that, we'll move the CAO report. Thank you. That now brings us to item number 4. Please read item 4 into the record.
Item number 4 are LAHD and CEO reports relative to amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 161.352 for a fee adjustment for inspection under the Systematic Code Enforcement Program, Municipal Code Section 151.05 for a fee adjustment for the registration of properties under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and Los Angeles Administrative Code Section 5.111.7 for the accrual and retention of interest and other earnings with the RSO Trust Fund.
Okay. Thank you. Could we have the CAO and the Housing Department come forward, please? Okay.
Morning.
Okay. I'd like the Housing Department to explain to this committee the fees that are, increases that are being requested and the justification.
Yes, good morning. Roberto Aldape, Assistant General Manager, Los Angeles Housing Department. On behalf of the department, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to discuss our request for an adjustment in the registration and systematic code enforcement fees. I would also like to thank the CAO for their report, and while slightly different from ours, nonetheless supports our need for a fee adjustment. Present at the table is Neil Guglielmo. He's our Assistant General Manager. He's here to answer any financial questions. I have to my left Director of Code Enforcement, Domingo Salceda, and to my right, Ana Ortega, Director of the Rent Stabilization Division, who will respond both to operational questions. I would like to take a moment to highlight some key points as stated in the department's transmittal, if I may, Chair. Foremost is that the rent, code, and compliance divisions are funded entirely by the rent and SCEP fees. LHD receives no money from the general fund for the operation of these programs. Secondly, LHD's last request for a rent and SCEP adjustment was 5 years ago in 2006. The rent fee was increased from $14 to its present $18.71, and the SCEP fee was increased from $27.24 to its present $35.52. This request is for an annual fee adjustment in the rent from this present $18.71 to $25.82. We're asking for a $7.11 per unit per year increase. And on the SCEP side, we're asking for an increase from $35.52 to $45.47, a $9.95 per unit per year increase. It must be noted that without this fee adjustment, it is forecast that by December 31st of 2012, there will be a deficit in the rent, an approximate amount of $4.8 million, and in SCEP, an amount of $6.4 million, a combined $11.2 million deficit by December 31st, 2012. Simply stated, the current fee schedule will not support the rent and code enforcement operational budgets. The department has been able to maintain service levels without any fee adjustments by diligently controlling costs such as freezing vacant positions, reducing the amount of contracts by 10%, implementing cost savings strategies by accepting online fee payments and online applications for rent adjustments, scanning and storing documents electronically instead of hard copies. We reduced cell phone usage and office supplies. And most recently, the department moved from our West Regional office moved from a leased office space to a city-owned building. In addition, during the city's financial crisis in 2010, the department, pursuant to the mayor's directive, backfilled 57 vacant positions from general funded departments, of which 26 out of that 57 were in the rent, code, and compliance divisions. This move substantially increased staff costs. Over the last 2 years, we made it real clear, and we communicated to the CAO, the CLA, the Mayor's Office, and the Budget Committee the need for this increase. As part of the department's ongoing dialogue, we have met with landlord and tenant associations, and we met with these respective organizations to discuss our fee adjustment. We believe these groups recognize the relevance of the rent code and compliance programs and are generally supportive of our fee adjustment. At this time, with the permission of the chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Guglielmo to discuss briefly some of the financial numbers and some pertinent assumptions.
Good morning. Neil Guglielmo, Housing Department, for Second Analyst Bureau of Sanitation.
Pull the microphone a little closer.
Sure. So what you have before you is the department's request for the rate adjustments for both the code enforcement and the rent fee. The department's request takes into account operating costs for the current fiscal year through fiscal year 16, and we've taken a very conservative approach in terms of our assumptions, adjustments to salaries, minimal adjustments to expenses, and anticipate increases that would impact us in terms of the cap rates for related costs. And essentially that is what is before you. Within the transmittal, we also talked about the accrual and retention of interest within the rent fund. Most special funds in the city do retain their interest that is accrued. The code enforcement fund, for example, does that. The rent fund, for whatever reason, when it was set up many years ago, did not contemplate the accrual and retention of the interest. So we have requested that those monies that the ratepayers are paying that go into that fund be retained within the fund, is all we're asking for. In addition to that, we'd also requested consideration of establishment of an emergency reserve fund or account within each of the two funds. Essentially what that would do is provide the department with the opportunity that we could quickly and adequately respond to any emergency or disaster that would affect the city. We would have funds segregated within the special fund that we can tap into, dramatically increase overtime, bring in technical assistance where required, if equipment was required as well, so that we could adequately respond and meet the residents' needs to get them back into housing, make sure that those structures are safe and habitable, get them out of the shelters, get them out of parks, wherever they're at, and back in the habitable structures. And then on the rent side as well, to make sure that the rent needs are being met and that we have compliance with the city's regulations. So we had requested that and contemplated that as part of our initial request. And we had discussed that as well with the city attorney's office. In further discussions with the CAO's office, in light of the continuing economic situation, our position is that we understand that that is a large burden, and we would then agree to defer that. But I think it is good, sound fiscal policy for the city to look wherever possible at ensuring that adequate reserves are established, especially within critical health and safety functions, so that those functions can continue in the event of a catastrophe or disaster. And what that also do is allow us to continue those services without impacting the general fund further, as the city then is waiting for funds to come in from FEMA and CalEMA to reimburse the city for its costs incurred. So that essentially was what we have in terms of our 5-year cash flow analysis. We put forward a request, and we spent the last several weeks working with the CAO's office and analyzing numbers. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have on the cash flow analysis.
Question of the department. When was the last time either one of these fees were adjusted, and how much was that adjustment?
That was back in 2005.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Back in 2005.
So 6 years ago.
Correct.
Both of them were adjusted at the same time?
Yes.
And what was the adjustment back then?
The adjustment was on the rent, an increase from $14 to $18.71, which was a $4.71 increase. On the SCEP, an increase from $27.24 to $35.52. Its present fee, which is a $8.28 increase.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The CAO has a difference of opinion of how much that should be. How did you arrive at that difference?
Well, we worked closely with, Trina Anzik, our Office of the CAO. We did work closely with the department to try to propose an increase that both supports the department costs and asks for some sacrifice on behalf of the Housing Department. And I do want to thank the Housing Department for their work on this. They were very helpful and cooperative during that process, and we've been working with them quite frequently over the last few weeks. The amount recommended in our report corresponds with a higher vacancy rate and no emergency reserve. While we believe that the concept of the emergency reserve is a good one, because of the current difficult fiscal climate, we're not recommending the reserve at this time. So that's the difference between the two amounts, effectively.
What does the current fiscal climate have to do with whether or not it's prudent to have a reserve?
That would be a policy decision, I would say. It would need to be a decision as to whether to increase rates effectively in order to be able to set the funds aside for the reserve. Our concern is balancing the need for the funds. When our office took a look at the historic reimbursements for FEMA and CalEMA, we found, going back to 1994, we weren't able to locate more than a few $1,000s. So from our perspective, the emergency that would be required in order to trigger such a reserve would be great. And in this fiscal climate, it might make sense to defer the conversation about that, given that there are so many other financial burdens at this time. But we do think that the idea of having an emergency reserve is a sound idea.
Well, isn't the department leaner today than it was in 1994?
Yes, it is. Well, I can't speak to 1994. We have looked back to the last rate increase, and the department has certainly made a lot of sacrifices and a lot of efficiencies, and those have been noted in our report as well. And again, I think it comes down to a policy decision. I think it's balancing the concern of raising the rates further in order to be able to create that reserve versus trying to keep the rates as lean as possible.
And what's the difference between your opinion and the Housing Department's request?
The assumptions are effectively the same. The difference is that we're looking out over 3 years, and we're finding a tipping point between solvency in the two funds at a 3-year point as opposed to the 5-year point, which is what housing was looking at. So we're doing an outlook over a shorter period of time. That is not uncommon. We do an annual review of fees for service whenever we put together the budget. Doing a 3-year outlook is extended, but we do think it's appropriate because we think that it's appropriate to contemplate or to be able to estimate what costs might be 3 years from now. We asked the department to hold vacancies to a 5% rate as opposed to their proposed 3% rate, so that makes a difference as well. And then we did remove the consideration of the emergency reserve, and all those things drop the percentage down. And the rent, it goes from 38% as proposed to 31, and for code it goes from 28% as proposed to 22.
So what's the dollar amount difference between them and your recommendation on an annual basis?
The dollar amount difference for rent, what was proposed as an increase was $7.11 from the department. For the discussion between the CAO and housing, our proposal is $5.80. For code, the original proposal was $9.95 increase, and it comes down to $7.81 increase.
Okay. And you say the main difference in those two numbers, you arrived at your figure based on
the main
3-year
driver
versus 5-year?
The main driver is, 5-year versus 3-year. We're taking a look at trying to ensure that the department is solvent through 3 years as opposed to 5 years. Then other difference is vacancies as well. We're looking at a difference between 3% vacancy rates for the two programs put together, holding 5% vacant as opposed to 3%. And then another difference is the emergency reserve. That's not factored in as well, and that caused an increase to the rate.
But aren't we encouraging across the board departments to take current and longer looks at what their budget should be?
We are, and what I would suggest is that, in fact, that's what we're doing here. For the last 2 years at least, my understanding is that Housing has submitted a request in conjunction with their budget. That would review their rates for 1 year. By going, I guess, on an interim basis, we're able to take a look at a 3-year outlook, and so that's an advantage of going this direction. So I guess you could say it's a compromise between the budget process, which would be 1-year outlook, and Housing's process, which would be a 5-year outlook.
But you're absolutely right, it's a policy decision.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So your analysis is based on a particular vantage point of a policy factor that the CAO in this analysis thinks that a 3-year and no or reduction of reserve is more prudent than having a reserve and looking at a 5-year outlook versus a 3-year outlook.
The outlook is based on our concern about the fiscal climate while keeping the department solvent and getting them on the way toward being in the black in these two funds. The issue with the emergency reserve has to do with the fact that as we look at, from our office perspective, reimbursements to Housing from FEMA and CALIMA, we're not seeing the amounts yet that were proposed to be generated by the emergency reserve. In the case of a spectacular disaster, those types of amounts would be required. That's true. So it's a balancing act between anticipating whether, in fact, there would be an extreme disaster, and in fact, we would not get reimbursements timely from FEMA. And my understanding is that the larger the disaster, unfortunately, and the more quickly the FEMA response. So it's a balance of the concerns between whether we create a higher increase now in anticipation of something that might not happen, as opposed to preparing for it and raising the rates. Yes, it is a policy decision.
Did you want to add something?
Well, I would just add that, the department obviously is sensitive to any rate adjustments as well. And I think our perspective was, in terms of looking at the emergency operating reserve, would be we'd phase it in. So we looked at a 30-day window, a 30-day period, that we would have the funds within that, the monies within the fund to cover the operations at an accelerated level using overtime, like technical assistance and such. And but one way of mitigating that impact all up front would be to essentially accrue those funds within both the SCEP and the rent, essentially phasing it over a 3-year period, so they wouldn't have to happen all at once. That was our original request. But obviously, it is a total policy decision. Having worked in sanitation for the last 10 years, I can tell you that I think having an operating reserve is very important because of the fact these are health and safety functions and activities, and we want to make sure they're protected, the residents are protected, and we want to mitigate that impact to the general fund as well, because we would love to see those reimbursements come in. And SAO has done a great job on trying to get reimbursements to the city from CalEMA and FEMA, but to the extent that we use the monies within our fund's emergency reserve, that means there's additional general fund monies that could be utilized for other departments' response to the emergency. They won't have to tap into those monies. So in a sense, it helps protect the entire city.
Okay. Thank you. Members, we have public comment cards. We can go to questions of the members first, or we can go to public comment, then questions of the members. Sure. Councilmember Reyes.
I've come across several cases where I have structures in my district that need attention, that the review, according to some tenants, hasn't been as thorough as it should be. On the other hand, there is the notion that the property owner is doing as much as they can, but it's the tenant who's causing the disrepair, so you've got this tension. The amounts that you are referring to, does that enhance our ability to offer the inspectors more time to deal with the case issue, given the volume of work they have and trying to address all these different cases? How is that being assessed in terms of performance, giving a stronger support system for our inspectors to deal with these complicated cases?
Yeah, Domingo Salcedo with the Housing Department. Obviously, the more time that an inspector has at inside a unit to observe the violations, the more thorough the inspection can be effectuated. Therefore, yeah, if the inspectors have more time. Currently, right now, we're on a 4-year cycle of the inspection of 780,000 units, rental units in the city. By ordinance, it would require us to go with a 3-year cycle. However, at this point, with the technology and the advancements that we've made, we're able to effectuate a 4-year cycle. The inspectors are in each unit, and they try to identify based on a menu that comes down to identify all the deficiencies in the unit. And certainly, if the inspectors had more time, they would be able to do a more thorough inspection.
So in that 4-year cycle, if I may, Mr. Chair, just to complete this analysis, so you have a 4-year cycle, and you go by geographic area, or do you go by calls that come in because of condition of a unit? How do you track that process? How do you know when to go back, or do you, or just kind of go through the 4-year list? I'm trying to understand, how do we deal with the accountability issue? Because if you're stuck in one case, that's just very complicated. Inspector has to keep going back. Does that mean other cases not being addressed, and the list gets longer, and you're set back from having to stay within that time frame?
Yeah, well, a systematic inspection program systematically inspects all the units, and they'll go through entire council districts, entire census tracts, and they'll inspect every building from one building to the next until the entire district is done. And that's the systematic process. In addition to that, we have the inspection, the complaint process, or in between those cycles or those inspections, if there's a tenant or a constituent that calls for an inspection or a problem in the unit, we'll respond to that. As a matter of fact, we have about a 90% compliance or response rate to all the complaints within 72 hours. So we address everything systematically, and if we need to go back based on a complaint, we'll go back within 72 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have public comment? Yes, Councilmember Alarcon.
Yes, I'm concerned about this emergency reserve concept. In my experience with the Northridge earthquake and the Sayre fires, we've always been reimbursed by FEMA. There's never been a need for us to front load. Well, let me put it this way. We've always had enough to front load with a commitment from FEMA to come in and reimburse us within a short span of time. Usually it's a 6-month to a year turnaround. It's not like it's 2 years to get a reimbursement from FEMA. It happens very quickly. So I'm not understanding the housing department's need to have this emergency reserve. We find it. Well, you know, what we put up $12 million in the Sayre fire that was reimbursed within a year. And it was not a problem. So I stand with the CAO, rarely, but on this occasion I stand with the CAO. I believe that there is no need to establish this additional reserve that places a burden on folks in our worst economic time. You talk about a disaster. That's the disaster, is the economy, and that's now. We don't have to wait for an earthquake to say that people are struggling. So I would, on the notion of whether or not we allow the department to have an emergency reserve, I say no, because if that kind of disaster occurs, then the CAO, it would be on the CAO, since they're recommending not doing it, it would be on them to find that emergency reserves for you to be able to do those inspections. And it happens very quickly. When the Northridge earthquake hit, it was a massive disaster, as I think you were all there. It was a massive disaster in the housing segment of our community, and yet the HUD came in very quickly and backed us up. Now, I believe, you know, we appreciate the work of Henry Cisneros in that case. But I frankly think any one of any president would have would have demanded that kind of response. And so I don't think we need the emergency reserve. So the second issue, so I would then support the CAO's recommendation for the lower amount, although maybe the 5-year period, I think if we extended your model for 5 years, you'd probably oppose my position, so we'll just leave it at 3 years. The other concern that I have is the share. I don't understand why tenants are left responsible for 100% of the share of the code enforcement when they're only paying 50/50 on the rent side of this. What's the rationale? I mean, if in fact you're concerned about the economic impact as a CAO, and if you're advocates for providing housing to people, I don't understand why you're recommending 100% that code enforcement the burden be placed on 100% on the tenants.
Let me respond to your first comment in regards to the reserve account. You have better information than I do in terms of the reimbursement from FEMA. I think right now we're still processing reimbursement for the Sayre fire that we responded to at Oak Ridge Mobile Homes. But we would have no issue with the CAO.
Wait. What reimbursement are you trying to get?
I believe there was some FEMA reimbursement that the CAO is.
Which one?
On the Sayre fire.
For what?
Maybe the CAO can respond to that.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. The question was regarding reimbursements on the Sayre fire?
He's saying that FEMA still owes us money relative to the Sayre fire.
To the housing department specifically.
I think I had heard that there was about $9,000 outstanding, is that correct?
9,000?
I believe that's the amount.
Is that what you're talking about?
I believe so, yeah.
9,000? I'll lend it to you out of my office account.
Okay, note that for the record.
Thank you, Chair. But we certainly would not oppose the CAO's recommendation as long as we can bifurcate that issue from the fee adjustments. In regards to your statement in regards to the SCEP fee split 50/50, the department in its transmittal does not recommend a change in the SCEP fee pass-through allocation. Now, prior to us submitting our transmittal and subsequent to submitting our transmittal, we met with the tenant advocates and we met with the property owner associations. And we told them of our fee adjustment. And I think, as I stated earlier in my opening remarks, they generally support our operations and generally support the fees. The tenant advocates made it real clear, however, that they would be putting forward public comments that the SCEP fee should be split 50/50. And there's arguments for and against that. And the landlords made it real clear that they would support our fee adjustments, but they wanted to keep the 50/50 split, the SCEP fee 100% pass through to the tenants. If you look at both sides of the argument, again, I hate to pun on this, but this is also a policy issue ultimately for this committee as well as the council in terms of how that gets resolved. If you look at the property owners association, if you look at that argument, there is an argument that can be made that the property owners receive some benefit from the systematic code enforcement program. We go out there and we systematically go through every room, interior and exterior, and provide a report in terms of the conditions of their property. An example would be when you buy a house, you hire a contractor to go from the roof to the basement to give you an assessment of what the condition of the property is. And so we provide that to the property owners, and that we believe that confers a benefit to maintain and protect their investment. So we believe that property owners do receive a benefit. On the flip side the property owners were saying they're being burdened with increases in gas, increases in utilities, increases in insurances, increases in maintenance costs, and any other fee passed through to them would be, impact that burden.
Wait a minute, you mean to make them legal?
No, to just make them code compliant.
But that means to make them legal.
Yes,
So so we're subsidizing, if we don't do this, we're allowing them to
No,
be illegal? Is that what you're
no, they're
suggesting?
saying that there's increase in cost in maintaining the property. There's an increase
To
in...
make them legal.
that-
Yeah, I mean, because you can't do anything, you can't add, the color of paint, you just got to make them legal.
That's correct. And there's a
So you're
cost...
saying that they shouldn't do that?
No, I'm not suggesting that,
But
Councilman.
how is that a burden for them to be legal?
It's a cost incurred in complying with the code in correcting the code violation.
But shouldn't they be legal?
Yes,
So why is that a burden?
this is the argument that they put forward, Councilmember.
Okay, well,
On
look,
the-
there's arguments on both sides. I mean, what I'm looking at is the incentives for everybody to want to maintain the building.
Correct.
So if it's not 50/50, then the owners would not have a disincentive to allow the building to get run down. I mean, because they're not paying anything into code enforcement, they'll just take their chances. The tenants, on the other hand, you want them to pay a little bit because you don't want them to be poking holes in the walls and graffitiing the building, and they would encourage their kids not to be causing damage, knocking out lights or whatever kids do. And so there seems to be a shared responsibility there, but 100% burden is on the tenants just doesn't seem equitable. And I mean, in terms of, I totally disregard the argument that it's an additional economic burden for them to be legal. I mean, they should be legal, and that shouldn't be the responsibility of the tenants, except to the extent that I think all of us understand that sometimes tenants will damage buildings. So I would like to see us move toward a 50/50 split on the code enforcement, and accept the CAO's recommendation on the fee increases otherwise.
Councilmember Reyes, then we'll go to public comment.
You said there were two sides to the coin,
Yes,
and I think you got through one side.
yes.
What's the other?
Well, when we met with the property associations, property owners associations, a position that we gleaned from that conversation was that it's the tenants who benefit from our inspection program. We go out there on a complaint basis, as my director, Mr. Salcedo, said, on a 72-hour notice. If there's a complaint and if the tenants fear retaliatory type of consequences by property owners, we would systematically go out and inspect that problem and seek out violations. So that's the other side.
That's the property owner's point of view?
I believe so.
That the tenant,
Councilmember Reyes, you can continue with your questions, but I want to let you know we have about 25
Right.
comment cards. Hold on. And I think we have some property owners here who can probably answer that directly
Right.
as a property owner, and then we have some tenants as well who can give their direct perspective instead of having the department interpret it for us. So we have them here.
I understand that. I was trying to get the, what the thought process was in putting forth these recommendations. So you're giving me that. So I've heard the property owner side. Is there a tenant side to this? Or was there an ability to engage?
Well, the tenant side, I believe, was that it was an equitable thing to do to split the SCEP fee 50/50.
Okay.
Let me say this, that, it's the department's position that we want to maintain the city's housing stock to be safe, decent, affordable, and habitable. And this fee adjustment is something that's necessary to continue that mission. So that's the department's mission.
And I understand it's a policy issue, and I'll follow the wisdom of the chair in listening to both interest groups, but as administrators, as practitioners, people in the field, what's your position? I mean, what's the reality here? I mean, you do it every day.
Yeah.
You're in there. There's got to be a sense of perspective that we could learn from, isn't there?
Well, I would defer to the chair and this.
Okay,
this-
I'll come back to that then.
Okay, look, let me ask a question a little differently. Is it the department's responsibility to make judgments or opinions about who pays the fee? Or is that a policy decision for the policymakers who dictate to the department what your job is?
I believe it's the latter.
What's that?
I believe it's the latter. I believe it's the policy decision that's made by this committee and ultimately the city council. No,
In
it's-
fact, we are. In fact, we are. Sometimes we don't like to accept that responsibility, especially when we're criticized, but that is our responsibility. We tell the department what your responsibilities are.
That's correct.
We allow the departments to develop day-to-day procedures that we have to approve. And if we don't approve them, then we're allowing you to do things without our authority, but that still remains on us, for us to check up on you, bring you here before committees like this, and ask you questions, what's going on, et cetera. But when it comes to who pays at the end of the day, that's a policy decision. That's not something that your opinion actually makes a difference on.
But, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, the notion of an informed decision, I believe, is an important notion. And to make an informed decision, albeit maybe as dictators or as policymakers, we should be in a position to understand the ramifications of our actions based on their day-to-day experience, because they're in the trenches. So that's the perspective I was looking for. I wasn't asking you to tell me what to do. That's what I was trying to understand, to make an informed decision.
Then let me ask you this question. I think the answer is pretty obvious. Do the tenants like to bear the brunt of half or all of the fee? I'm serious. Answer it simply. Do they like it or not?
I believe when we met with them, they said it would be equitable to split the fee 50.
Okay? But my question is specific. Do they like to pay that, any portion of it or all of it, or would they prefer that somebody else pay it? Somebody answer
I
that.
would prefer that someone else would pay it. I
Okay,
think that
now,
goes-
the property owners, would they like to bear the burden of half or all of the fee, or would they like somebody else to pay it?
They would prefer that someone else.
Thank you. Exactly. So, it's a pretty obvious situation. If we policymakers go in one direction, the people who don't have to pay it are going to obviously be happy and perhaps applaud us. If we go in another direction and somebody else pays it, then the other people in the room are going to applaud us as well. It's pretty simple.
It is simple, but we're also getting an interpretation that this fee benefits one group over another.
That's obvious.
And the fact is, from their perspective, they can tell me who they see benefiting based on the work they do.
And they're here to tell us.
That's right. That's why I'm asking those questions.
Great. Being that we do have council at 10 o'clock, and we do have over 25 public comment cards, we're going to go to 1 minute apiece on the public comment, and I'll take them up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Stay in the room because we're probably going to ask you to come back to the table. So I'll go through the public comment on item number 4, as the cards have been filled out and turned in the order that they arrived on my desk. We have Terrell. Terrell, thank you. And then we have Larry Gross, and we have Michael Millman, and then we have Jim Clark. Okay, please proceed. State your name for the record.
My name is Brett Terrell. I'm Director of Advocacy for the Inner City Law Center. The Systematic Code Enforcement Program has been the city's most effective program at maintaining LA's stock of housing. It's a national model for ensuring that landlords comply with minimal habitability standards. ICLC strongly supports funding SCEP levels at SCEP at levels sufficient to do the job. However, we ask the committee to reconsider who pays for SCEP. It's unfair to ask tenants to pay the full cost of SCEP. Landlords should bear some of the cost of ensuring that they comply with the minimal habitability requirements, especially because they benefit from SCEP. According to the landlord survey conducted as part of the council's rent study, at least 60% of landlords find SCEP useful in some way, and SCEP is most valued by owners of older and smaller properties. Owners of properties built in 1960 or earlier were 3.6 times more likely to say the SCEP is very helpful for identifying needed maintenance. At page 163, the study states, owners of older, smaller properties tend to experience SCEP as a useful source of technical assistance for maintaining their properties.
Thank you very much. Next.
Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. We're not opposed to the fee increase, but we're opposed to how it's distributed. SCEP fees should be split like the RSO fees. It's unjust for tenants who can least afford it to bear the full financial burden. In President Obama's tax plan speech, he said everyone, including millionaires and billionaires, has to pay their fair share. We agree with this, and so do the people camping out on City Hall's front lawn, as well as the other protesters around the country. How is it fair that Social Security-dependent Pico Union renter Dolores Lane, with $250 left to live on after paying her rent, has to pay the full SCEP fee, while multimillionaire landlord Donald Sterling pays nothing? We urge you to heed our President's words and apply it to SCEP fee to not just provides another economic hit to the 99%. Support the increase, but support it with a 50-50 split. Anything less is unfair and unjust. Thank you.
Next.
Yes, good morning. Michael Millman, I'm a housing provider. Let's be clear, we're opposed to it. You need to continue this, roll it over 90 days, and let me tell you why. All the premises offered today are fake and phony. The vacancy factor is not 3%, it's not 5%. In many districts, it's 15 and 20%. Number two, the owners were never at any time met to discuss any of this. Building and safety can do it. They have no inspections in Beverly Hills, Culver City, Inglewood, Santa Monica, and they all get along. And every unit should be legal. We don't need the housing department to tell us how to make things legal and proper. We can spend our own money to get people to do it. It's no benefit to us. They didn't meet with us. The vacancy factors are baloney. Let's kick it over 90 days and let's have that meeting and make a deal. I'm willing to deal, but let's do it fairly. Don't let them lie to you that they met with us and we're on board. I'm opposed.
Thank you. Jim?
Jim Clark, Executive Director with the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, the largest housing provider in the city. I'd just like to say that contrary to what Mr. Millman said, we did have a meeting with the Housing Department. However, to say that we were generally receptive, if rolling of the eyes means that you're generally receptive, I don't think so. We would like to express that we are against any fee increase, and we are against the 50-50 split on SCEP. When tenants start being cited for violations, then we might think about it. But right now, it is a tenant benefit, and they should pay for it. Tenants are not cited, landlords are, they pay the fines. I'd also like to say that, once again, they're coming to what we call the money tree. They know that they can raise these fees and have their department, flush with money. Look at what the controller said last year in her audit. The SCEP system had a $1 million surplus. These folks don't need a raise, they don't need any more money. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Huey, Juan Fernandez, Jane Scott, and Lupe Victor. Go ahead.
Good morning, members of the LA City Council. My name is Bill Huey. I'm the president of Fair Housing Coalition. We're an organization that believes in equality under the law for landlords and renters. There are 3 points I'm going to make. Number one, how can the city tell landlords that we're only entitled to a 3% rent increase when the city itself wants a 33% increase on these fees? I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Okay, and number two, there should be some kind of program where really poor tenants get subsidized by the city, because if a landlord can't collect anything close to fair market value, he doesn't have the money to maintain his buildings. If you look at all the buildings in REAP and you ask the landlords how much are you collecting and you went through their books, you'd find out the reason that they can't keep up with the code is because the building's not paying for itself. I can bring you 100 landlords, they'll testify to that. And also the LA Housing Department, when a building's in REAP, won't pay the water bill for the building. There's a disconnect notice. Why can't they pay it every month when the landlord turns it in? They're compounding the problem. These people have no clue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Mi nombre es Juan Fernández, pertenezco a la Unión de Vecinos, y pues estoy en contra del
el aumento de registro y inspecciones,
My name is Juan
porque
Fernandez,
pues no
I'm a
nos
member
alcanza
of,
nuestro salario.
Unión de Vecinos, and we're against this rate increase because we don't have enough money, and we don't make enough money in our wages to pay for this rent increase.
Pues sí, eso es nada más todo lo que yo puedo decir, nada más.
And that's all I would like to say.
Gracias, señor. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you. Jane?
I'm Jane Scott. I'm glad to hear that you people are responsible for the Department of Housing, but I wonder if you really know how they operate. They will send you a letter that there has been a complaint against you, and here is your bill. It has been repaired by the city. You cannot find out what the complaint was. You have to pay the bill, and there is no appeal, according to them. Now, we still live in the United States of America, and I don't believe that any city department can take away property, whether it's financial or physical. This is unconstitutional. It is against the Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights is what makes us the free people. I really think that you need to find out about this department. If they are a direct reflection of you, and they are corrupt, then this is what it's saying about you. Thank you.
Thank you. Lupe Victor, James Porter, Alicia Aguero, and Deborah Burton. Is Lupe Victor in? One second. Is Lupe here?
I'm not going to be.
Okay, go ahead. State your name for the record. Yes.
Oh, okay. My name is James Porter. I stand here in solidarity of the Housing Collective. We are past the second year of these hard economic times. The landlords have seen 2 rent increases, enjoying the benefit of the 3% and 2% increase. And all the while, tenants are suffering. Paycheck decreasing, job loss. And now there's a fee proposal where again the tenants are treated unfairly. We are not against the Los Angeles Housing Department fees in general, but we are against any increase in these economic times unless the fees are combined and shared equally by tenants and landlords. Both of us benefit from the RSO and SCEP program. We ask that you pass a motion today to instruct the LA Housing to split the fees 50-50 so the landlords share costs with us equally. How dare we be asked to pay the majority of the fee when the landlord's check's going up and ours going down?
Thank you. Alicia? Un segundo para el intérprete.
Y más cerca a la señora.
Acerca el micrófono, por favor.
Mi nombre es Alicia Agüero y vengo de la Unión de Vecinos.
My name is Alicia Agüero, and I'm here with Unión de Vecinos.
Y no estamos de acuerdo con sus decisiones que están haciendo porque no nos benefician a nosotros.
We don't agree with the decisions you're making because they're not benefiting us.
Necesitamos que nos ayuden y que no nos estén cobre y cobre más dinero, más impuestos, que nosotros no tenemos dinero para pagar eso.
We need you to help us, and we don't want you to keep charging us more money and more increases on our fees because we don't have enough money to pay for that.
Es todo, gracias.
That's all, thank you.
Gracias, thank you. Deborah?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Deborah. I'm a member of LA CAN. The fee increases are going forward, yet none of the other comprehensive RSO reforms has moved at all. Tenants need some rent relief, not fee increase. Tenants on fixed income, people with disability, elderly people, have had numerous benefit cuts over the past year and a half. Every last dollar is shaved away, and then fee are increased. Split all fees equally. From this point on, all we asking for is for an equal increase, not just for the tenants, but also the impact should be towards the landlords. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Next, we have Laura Cuadros, Leonard Woods, Alma Salcido, and Sandra Levine. Okay.
Buenos días. Interpretación, por favor. Mi nombre es Laura Cuadros. Yo vengo de la Unión de Vecinos de Boyle Heights.
Good morning, my name is Lara Cuadros. I'm here with the Unión de Vecinos from Boyle Heights.
Y yo tenía tres cosas que quisiera comentar con ustedes.
I would like to make 3 points.
Una de ellas es, tanto dueños como inquilinos se benefician de las inspecciones.
One of them is the following. Renters as property owners both benefit from these inspections.
Los inquilinos porque viven en mejores condiciones.
The tenants benefit because they live in better conditions.
Y los dueños porque de esta manera con las inspecciones sus viviendas no caen en condiciones subestándar.
And the property owners benefit because due to these inspections of their properties, the properties do not deteriorate.
La otra cosa que quería decir es que las inspecciones de STEP suceden cada 3 o 4 años en las viviendas.
One more point that I'd like to make is that skip inspections happen every 3 or 4 years at every unit.
Sin embargo, los inquilinos pagan anualmente por estas inspecciones.
Nevertheless, the renters pay annually for these inspections.
Si el propósito de estos aumentos, además de mantener el servicio del Departamento de Vivienda,
If the purpose for this increase, in addition to maintaining the service provided by LAHD,
es crear un fondo de reserva,
is to create a reserve fund,
¿por qué solamente los inquilinos tienen que pagar de su bolsillo para este fondo?
then why is it that only the renters have to pay from their own pocket
Cuando
to
en
be able to create this fund?
Cuando en esta época de crisis los inquilinos son los que menos dinero tienen.
When during this economic crisis, the people that have the least amount of money is the renters.
Gracias,
Estamos
señora.
aquí para pedirles que tomen una decisión equitativa.
We're here to ask you to
Que
please
pasen a medias
make
las tarifas.
a just and fair decision. Thank you.
Gracias, señora.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Alma Salcido, vengo de Unión de Vecinos, soy
Good
organizador
morning.
comunitario.
My name is Alma Saucedo, and I'm here with Unión de Vecinos.
I'm a community organizer.
I'm a community organizer.
Y bueno, hemos estado viniendo, primero que nada, disculpen, no les dije buenos días, y
We're here, and I'm sorry I didn't say good morning to you, but good morning.
hemos estado aquí por como 2 años ya pidiéndoles una tregua para nuestros inquilinos. Yo también soy inquilino.
We've been coming here for about 2 years asking you to please to come to to meet us halfway, to come to a mutual agreement for the tenants and for the
En ese tiempo estábamos perdiendo trabajos. Para este tiempo hay más personas en desempleo.
During these 2 years that we've been coming here and have to miss going to work. And now during this period of 2 years, there's a lot more people without a job.
Porque la crisis económica está demasiado mal.
Because the economic crisis, as you all know, it's in a very bad
Hemos
situation.
estado pidiéndoles por algo beneficioso para los inquilinos.
We've been asking you for something that would benefit the renters.
Y ahora resulta que es algo malo para los inquilinos lo que están proponiendo.
And now it's turning out that what is being proposed is something that's going to impact negatively to the tenants.
En cuanto a la economía que estamos viviendo. Le
the
pido
economy
que
that we're
sean
currently in.
clementes con nosotros, con el pueblo, con la gente que venimos a pedirles que apoyen a nosotros.
We're asking you to please be considerate of us, the tenants, the citizenship, and all of us are here to ask you to please be fair and help us. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Leonard Woods. I see Miss Perry done jumped out again. She won't be here for the tennis again. But listen, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Cardenas, and Mr. Alarcon, I really appreciate how you pulled housing up and made them trying to find out if they ever talked to the tenant side. They've never confronted the tenants, but the landlord always got HD ear. HD still haven't collected the money that the tenant had been paying already for the skip fees. Because we sent a letter and asked them, and they said they sent the bill out, but nobody have paid, just like that $9,000 y'all talking about they haven't received. If they started going and getting the money that they always owe to, then they wouldn't need to try to get a bank account. Because can't no tenants accept no bank account right now. Ain't nobody got no money. This is hard times. If we gonna do anything, let's do it 50-50. But the tenants should not carry the burdens of what these landlords wants to do. And apparently they got the SD ear.
Thank you. Sandra.
Buenos días, honorable Consejo de la Ciudad.
¿Su nombre, por favor?
Mi nombre es Sandra Levin
Okay.
y soy miembro de la Coalición por la Sobrevivencia Económica.
Good morning, my name is Sandra Levine. I live at 1019 43rd Street, Apartment 2, and I'm also a member with the Coalition for Economic Survival.
Estoy aquí para apoyar las inspecciones de la ciudad, porque las inspecciones garantizan que los inquilinos tengan un apartamento seguro y habitable. Las inspecciones benefician tanto al dueño como al inquilino, pero también es justo que se divida la cuota de pago entre las dos partes.
I'm here to support the city inspections because the inspections guarantee that tenants live in safe, habitable apartments. The inspections benefit both the landlord and tenant, therefore, it will be fair if the payments are divided among the landlord and the tenant.
Mi experiencia comenzó con una sola gota de agua en el lavatrastos de mi cocina. Lo reportaba y nunca lo arreglaron. Después de 3 años y con ayuda legal, lo arreglaron.
My personal experience began with a leak in my kitchen sink, and I kept reporting it to management, and it basically went continuing to rot away underneath, and mold grew for 3 years, and after, some legal assistance, the owner finally did the repair.
Las inspecciones son necesarias para asegurarse de que el dueño no ignore su responsabilidad, porque también es la responsabilidad de ellos como dueños. Quiero pedirle al honorable Consejo de la Ciudad que por favor divida en partes iguales la cuota de estas fees que se están pidiendo.
Inspections are necessary to ensure that the owner does not ignore his responsibility, and since it's the owner's responsibility, I'm asking the city council members to please divide the fee payment into equal part 50-50 to make sure there's fairness in the city. Thank you.
Y por último, por favor, lamento que la señora Jen Perry no esté presente. Me hubiera gustado que ella nos escuchara.
Gracias.
Esperamos que nosotros tengamos tiempo para las próximas elecciones de escucharla a ella.
Thank you.
Buenos días.
Just wanted to make a note that I would have greatly appreciated if Councilmember Perry would have been here to listen to the comment.
Thank you. Next, we have Blanca Espinosa and Ricardo Aguirre, Joaquin Marin, and James Berhard.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Blanca Espinosa y pertenezco a la Unión de Vecinos.
Good morning, my name is Blanca Espinosa and I belong to Unión de Vecinos.
Soy residente del este de Los Ángeles, Boyle Heights, durante 13 años en el mismo apartamento.
I've been living in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles, in the same apartment for the last 13 years.
En 13 años he recibido una pintura en mi casa.
During those 13 years, I've only had my house painted once.
Un cambio de carpeta porque la que estaba ya estaba dañada.
The carpet was only changed has only been changed once because the one that was there was already damaged.
Pero cada año he pagado la contribución que me han pedido para que sean las inspecciones.
But every year, however, I pay for the contribution of the amount that I've been asked in order for the inspections to take place.
Ahora quieren que nosotros paguemos el 100% de las inspecciones y no creo que sea justo.
And now we're being asked to pay 100% of the inspection fees, and I don't think it's fair.
Y solo quiero que consideren mi ejemplo para que ustedes decidan si es justo que nosotros como inquilinos tengamos que pagar el 100% de las inspecciones.
What I'm asking is for you to consider our example and then decide whether it's fair for us to pay as tenants 100% of the fee for the inspections that take place.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you. Ricardo?
Okay. I understand that costs are going up and revenues required. The landlords, I represent a landlord. The burden we bear to maintain the units, it is pretty tough. I owned buildings in other cities, and LA is a little different. And I think that one of the issues here that needs to really be looked at is that when it comes to getting the apartments, these fees, these increases, it's really hard to maintain the properties and offer the tenants, quality housing because of, you know, all the things that are going on with the SCEP program. There's bigger issues there that I'd like to address, but it's not the time right now. But I think that, you know, the burden is that they want the owners to pay during hard times because people believe we have the money and they believe we have the resources. And I think it's unfair to assume that all the landlords are Mr. Sterling, or quite a few of us are. I'm going to go over time like you allotted time to other people.
Excuse me, I allowed time for other people because we do not deduct the translation time. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to finish your thought.
All I wanted to address is that in all fairness, we are not all Donald Sterling. Quite a few landlords are, you know, people that they live off of the duplex or fourplex. So that has to be considered.
Thank you for your perspective. Joaquín?
Buenos días, mi nombre es Joaquín Marín y soy residente de Boyle Heights.
Good morning, my name is Joaquín Marín. I am a resident in Boyle Heights.
Hace 2 años que estamos viniendo a pelear para que no incrementen el aumento de cada año por la economía, como ustedes saben.
We've been coming for the last 2 years fighting to ask you to not approve an increase of the fees due to the current situation we find ourselves in.
Porque ahorita muchas personas como yo estamos desempleados y tenemos que escoger entre pagar renta o darle a nuestros hijos lo que ocupan.
Because many of us, including myself, are unemployed and we have to choose either between paying the rent or provide for the needs that our children require.
Entonces no creo que tengan que hacer un fondo de emergencia como dicen, y mucho menos cobrándoselo a los inquilinos.
Therefore, I don't believe that it's adequate to create a reserve fund for emergencies and then charge the tenants for it.
Y mucho menos en este tiempo de crisis. Y yo creo que es justo que si se necesita sea un 50 y 50 entre inquilinos y dueños.
Especially during this economic crisis, so I think it would be fair for you guys to consider that if it's really needed, for you guys to divide it 50-50 between tenants and property owners.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gracias.
Good morning, Dr. James Bethard, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. I'm with the Coalition of Economic Survival and a few other organizations representing disabled and veterans of America. I agree with the 50-50 increase shared by both the tenants and the landlords. As we did in 1995, the tenants grow together, as it says in chapters 1 and 1A of the RSO, that the landlord would bear the brunt of a 100% cost for the inspections. It would be 2 times a year, and they have 60 days to comply with that. No one has addressed that yet today, but what happens is that we stood behind the landlords because we care about Los Angeles. We are Los Angeles, and we put ourselves forward to do this. Now they come and they ask you to make policy in order to go through the back door yet once again and open up a pipeline that has nothing to do with the realities of the actual facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Ana Hernandez, Rachel Torres, Araceli Brito. Okay, you may proceed.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Torres. I'm a research analyst for Unite Here, Local 11. On behalf of the 20,000 members we represent, we wish to ask that all parties contribute their fair share and that the SCEP fees should be paid evenly between landlords and tenants, similar to the rent registration fees. This is fair and just. I don't have to reiterate what all the other folks have said. We live in very tough times and no one is safe. The Hotel Bel Air, for example, a hotel that has long-standing been a union hotel, closed in 2009 on the exact day that the union contract was going to expire. The hotel is going to open on Friday, and none of the workers, 250 workers, were laid off with no benefits, no severance. They come back to this hotel with no job security, no health insurance. This is the new normal of our times, and this fee increase is another unfair burden on our members. We ask that these be split evenly. It's fair and just. Thank you.
Thank you. Ana?
Sí, muy buenos días. Mi nombre es Ana Hernández, soy un residente de Boyle High.
Good morning, my name is Ana Hernández. I'm a resident of Boyle Heights.
Realmente Se me hace muy triste que cada año tenemos que venir enfrente de ustedes y presentar nuestras quejas.
To be honest with you, it makes me very sad that every year we have to come and be in front of you to present our complaints.
Realmente a mí me gustaría hacerle preguntas a cada uno de ustedes si en alguna ocasión ha convivido con personas que realmente son de escasos recursos.
I would like to ask a question to each and every one of you guys. Have you ever really dealt with or lived with people that are low income?
Ustedes no saben en qué condiciones se encuentran todas estas personas que viven en viviendas que están en malas
You
condiciones.
really have no idea what condition people are living in. People that are living in houses that are in very bad conditions.
Y personas que tienen chinches, cucarachas.
Because the people in their homes, they have bed bugs, they have cockroaches.
Son realmente condiciones insalubres y que personas no deberían de estar
They're
habitando
very
ahí.
bad health and safety conditions. This type of conditions, no human being or person has to be living under.
Yo sí les invitaría a cada uno de ustedes, yo sé que son personas muy ocupadas, pero que deberían de dar algunas veces vueltas en los vecindarios que representan.
I would really invite each and every one of you to visit the neighborhoods and the districts you represent. I know that you're very busy people, but I would really extend an invitation so you know what we go through.
Y ustedes tienen una responsabilidad con las comunidades, a estar ahí.
Gracias.
You have a responsibility with the communities to be there and represent them.
Thank you. Araceli?
Sí, muy buenos días. Mi nombre es Araceli Brito y yo vivo en Boyle Heights.
Good morning, my name is Araceli Brito and I also live in Boyle Heights.
Ya. Y yo soy un ejemplo de lo que está pasando, ¿verdad?, en mi casa.
I'm an example of what's happening.
Tengo una niña incapacitada.
What's happening in my
Yo
home.
recibo 440 de sabe support de mi hija.
I have a disabled daughter that I take care of at home, and I receive $440 for benefits to care for my daughter.
464 del Seguro Social. 464 de su disability de ella. Seguro
I receive
Social.
$464 to care for her disability.
Yo no recibo welfare, no recibo dinero del gobierno.
I don't-
Estampillas.
I'm not receiving welfare nor monies from the government. I only receive food stamps.
Entonces mi problema es ¿verdad? Yo estoy hablando por mí.
This is my problem, okay? But I'm speaking on behalf of myself.
Y no nos alcanza para pagar más renta. Yo ahí donde vivo pago $7.50.
We don't have enough money to pay for higher rent. Currently, the place where I live, I'm paying $750 rent a month.
Me quiero mover a otra casa porque esa casa no sirve. Se está cayendo arriba de mí.
I would like to move to another place because that place is in a very bad condition. Currently, it's almost falling on top of me.
Tengo dos niños más, uno de 3 años, uno de 5 y el papá de mis niños. No hay trabajo, me lo han descansado.
I have, besides from my daughter who's disabled, I have 2 more children, one that's 3 years old, one that's 5 years old, and the father of my children also lives there, and he's unemployed as well.
Yeah. No es justo, la casa llueve arriba,
Gracias.
desde adentro, tengo cucarachas, tengo ratones, la dueña no hace nada, la dueña anda paseando,
It is
se fue
really-
a México.
It's really not
Gracias,
fair. I have cockroaches, I have mice. When it rains, it leaks in the house. It's not fair because the property owner is on vacation. She went to Mexico and I'm paying the burden of this.
No es justo que paguemos más.
So it's not fair for us to pay a higher rate. Thank you.
Marta Arango, Jesus Villarreal, and Ryan Menier. This is it, last one. Marta?
Buenos días, mi nombre es Marta Arango y vengo a pedir que nos ayuden,
Good morning, my name is Marta Arango and I'm here to ask for your help.
que trabajemos juntos.
Let's work
inquilinos
together.
con renteros.
Let's work together.
Que
Tenants and property
que
owners.
se divida.
Let's divide the fee
Creo que es
50-50.
justo y Yo a veces no entiendo en el contrato que yo tengo de mi renta,
I think that that's fair
nos dan
because,
3 días.
because sometimes, I don't think it's fair. In the contract that I have, it states the following.
Te dan 3 días para pagar tu renta. Si no pagas esa renta, tú tienes que pagar una multa.
In the contract I have, they give you 3 days for you to pay your rent. If you don't pay within those 3 days, then they give you a penalty. They charge you extra for not paying the rent.
Y cuando nosotros nos quejamos que hay algún problema en la casa, el rentero nunca llega. Entonces, ¿por qué no hay también un aviso de 3 días para los renteros?
And when we make a complaint about something that's in disrepair in our homes, we make the complaint, but they don't come in 3 days. So why can't we as well give them 3 days, give the property 3 days for them to come and repair our complaint?
Ya es todo lo que...
Gracias.
Thank you.
Buenos días. Yo soy inquilino de Boyle Heights y también tengo el mismo punto del 50-50.
Good morning. I'm also a tenant. I live in Boyle Heights, and I also want to make the same point that I'm supporting to divide it 50-50.
En realidad los apartamentos donde yo vivo son 16 unidades y apenas los metimos en repo porque estaban muy deteriorados.
To be honest with you, the apartment building in which I live, there are 16 units, and this building barely went into REAP because the apartments were in very bad condition.
Por fin el dueño le está haciendo un Mickey Mouse ahí a todo el edificio.
Finally, the property owner is doing a Mickey Mouse job. They're trying to repair the building.
Y pues solamente pido justicia, que sean parejos. Es todo lo que...
All I ask
mi
is for
opinión.
you to be fair and just to be balanced, please.
Gracias, thank you. Our last speaker, Ryan, I'm sorry.
Ryan Manier with the
Manier.
California Apartment Association. With the California Apartment Association, did meet with LHAD over these fees, and we really thank them for meeting with us. We've been meeting with them on a quarterly basis this year, and they've been great about getting word out about educational offerings that they've been offering to our landlords, and we applaud them for their online billing payment system. Just to remind you, 2 years ago, we were here on a rent study, and in that study, the consultant recommended that SCEP fees be 100% passed through to the tenants. Also, that SCEP fees are for all residents, not just rent-controlled residents in the city of Los Angeles. Also, apartments are inspected by the county of Los Angeles once a year for health and safety reasons. And with rent control, as you know, there's no means testing. So a rent control tenant can be high income, middle income, and low income. And in fact, Donald Sterling could live in a rent controlled apartment if he wanted to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's our last speaker card. Council, the hour of 10 o'clock has passed, so council is going to commence. I have a feeling that the council members on this committee who are present have made up their mind as to how they want to vote. I'm going to move the CAO report, and Councilmember Alarcón, were you going to move something, or?
Well, I support the fee increase as recommended by the CAO, but...
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I'm saving it for later.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding.
Thanks for the warning.
I support the CAO report in terms of the fee increase, but I believe the code enforcement program should be split 50-50 and would move that.
Okay. All right, so second by Reyes. So on that one, we have 2 votes, aye. I'm a no on the Alarcón move.
We could take the support of the housing.
The CAO report.
The CAO report, and take a vote on that, and then we could take a vote on the splitting of the fee, or you know.
But the CAO's report includes
So what we
100%
could do-
burden on the tenants on the code enforcement.
We could take a vote on the CAO report absent the term of how the fee would be.
If we just take a vote on the fee increase without supporting the entire report.
That's what I'm saying, bifurcating the portion of the report that refers to who should be burdened on the fee amount, right? Okay, so
Yeah,
we have a motion
I think
by
that-
Wesson.
Just to be clear as to which recommendation in the CAO report that is not going to be voted on at this point.
Correct. The portion of the CAO report as moved by Councilmember Wesson is the report in its entirety absent the delineation of who shall be burdened with pay the fee, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first vote. Okay, on that one,
Wesson, aye.
unanimous? Okay, that's unanimous. Now, the second vote will be on a motion by Alarcon to have the fee split 50-50. Okay, so that's the second vote. I vote no.
I would have to support the chair.
Okay, so that's a no. So two ayes and two noes. Reyes and Alarcon are in favor of vote aye on Alarcon's motion, and then Wesson and Cardenas vote no. So what we have coming out of committee is?
There's no majority recommendation on that item.
On that item.
So the report would reflect that.
But there would be a recommendation on the first portion.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, all right, thank you. And so that's the way it'll move from this committee. That concludes the items on the agenda. Is there any here for general public comment? No one filled out a general public comment card. General public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned.